very kindly agreed to co-host with me because I thought, if there's one thing I've learnt standing in front of 27 young people every week is they don't want to listen to just an old person. So I've recruited some youth to help me. But I definitely want to just echo that acknowledgement for the host organisations in the room. Thank you for your help in the last 6 weeks as we experiment with this. I want to acknowledge our Deputy Mayor Rohan, who's very kindly agreed to be here, and Rachel, who leads the climate work at the council. So thank you. Look, I hope you are prepared to be dazzled by big, tough questions coming your way. Yeah, so Earthminds, this is really just an initiative to try and get young people to be able to really engage with some of the issues that we see locally. Now, instead of me talking about it a whole lot, we thought we would show you instead, over a course of about 3 minutes, what the last 6 weeks has been about. This person is arguably responsible for saving over 1 billion lives. He is arguably the world's greatest superhero, and as we've just shown, no one knows about him. So in 1960s, the world was quite concerned about this idea that there was going to be a major population overload. There was a lot of work being done at the time, and society took it quite seriously, that there was just no way that the world could feed the billions of people that were coming. And in fact, I think there's a quote from a very specific book written by a well-regarded expert at the time. In the 1970s and 80s, so looking forward to the next 2 decades, hundreds of millions of people will starve to death in spite of any programs we embark upon now. So people were pretty smart then, but this was actually something they were very worried about. This guy, on the other hand, his name is Norman Borlaug. So if you're going to go look him up when you get home, Norman Borlaug, he got to work. He's a plant scientist. And so through innovation and experimentation, he developed lots of different wheat strains. They're called semi-dwarf wheat strains. And what that meant, at the time, the concerns here were particularly in Africa and Asia and Latin America, where hundreds of millions of people were predicted to, join the population. It meant that they could triple the yields in these places, which saved literally hundreds and millions and a billion lives. So the message there is we face obviously lots of challenges ahead of us, but innovation plays a remarkable role. And I hope as you guys listen today, and as many of these young leaders are looking at ways in which they can engage with society, that serves as a bit of a beacon for the amazing things that can be done with innovation and some hard work.
And so with all this knowledge, they've really looked at the gaps within Nelson Tasman, what we're missing, to allow them to craft a strong problem statement, which will enable them to kind of work towards a solution next term.
So don't expect us to sit there tonight. So you'll see that there's a little bit of paper, hopefully, that you've sat on or is near you. So those bits of paper are going to be things that you can provide feedback on as the teams come up. So hopefully you've got a pen, and alongside each of the 6 teams that will present tonight, you'll get the chance to give any feedback to the teams. What they've been told is they're going to get about 5 minutes, give or take a minute, and then after that we'll give each team and you guys an opportunity for 1 or 2 questions.
Aotearoa contributes to 1.7% of total world erosion, despite us only being 0.2% of global land area. Sedimentation is harmful to the environment because it carries nutrients that promote growth of harmful flying algae, clogs the gills of fish, lowers visibility, making it harder for sea life to hunt and sea plants to photosynthesize, ruins habitats by changing the material of riverbeds. This is why our group has decided to explore sedimentation runoff due to improper forestry practices.
Our focus is finding eco-friendly and affordable ways to prevent sedimentation. Worldwide, reservoirs lose about 1% of their water capacity per year due to sedimentation. But this means that within 100 to 150 years, many reservoirs will be completely filled with sediment, reducing their ability to provide drinking, irrigation, and energy.
Countries like Austria are spending over 350 million euros just last year to try and support forestry companies. In New Zealand, this is not very sustainable.
We can learn about the sources that other countries use to reduce their sedimentation, which helps us to reduce ours quicker. And hopefully we can reduce sedimentation quicker than we think.
We aim to explore alternative ways to trap sediment that are effective and inexpensive. We believe that higher stakes would encourage companies to better implement necessary regulations. We also believe that the current standard is too lenient, especially with heightening weather conditions. Finally, we're looking into data collection taken to ensure companies are following legal regulations. Currently, companies are checked infrequently and therefore are given room to slack.
Thank you guys for listening to us, and we hope that we convince you guys that sedimentation is a big problem, and a special thanks to Jerry for helping us.
In your research, did you find any countries that had effective policy around like setbacks from rivers or logging practices itself that could be advantageous?
Yeah, so many countries in like Germany and Austria have practices around safer forestry, such as taking out smaller portions of land, which still provides cover for sedimentation. But as I mentioned before, this has much lower profit margins for forestry companies, and so it requires subsidies and incentives for the governments to actually pay in order to make this a thing that happens in countries.
Just wondering if you've come upon any options for what forestry companies can do. You talked about sediment traps. Is there any other things that forestry companies can be doing?
We actually had a representative from a forestry company come and speak to us. He showed us a couple of methods, obviously sediment traps, but also when you're cutting down trees, leaving enough cover provided by the trees to stop the rain from coming down into the sediment and washing it into the river.
Also planting grass seed is good, and buffer zones between rivers and the forestry also makes a huge difference.
There are certain laws relating to how far or close to a river you can plant and how steep the angle can be. So how much sediment is going to go into the river. So there are like stuff around that.
Our big problem is people are throwing away clothes that could still be worn or recycled. In New Zealand, about 18,000 tonnes of textile waste is thrown away every year. And the sad thing is, only 13% of locals have ever bought clothing from the Nelson Environment Centre. Some people also avoid second-hand shopping because they see it as outdated, even though it's one of the most sustainable choices we can make. This is everyone's problem: consumers, producers, community leaders, and those who deal with the waste. And we all have a role in the solution.
A few of the ideas that we found have been tried before are swapping events, where everyone brings unused clothes to swap for something they might wear more often. Loyalty programs. Studies show that 75% of customers prefer shops with reward programs. And another thing we found was upcycling workshops. It is a creative way to give old clothes a second life. Doing events to boost popularity. Events give customers a reason to come to the store.
Pair with flair workshops and events where you get an old piece of clothing that could be broken and you repair it and you make it better.
In clothing swaps, everyone brings in underused clothes and swaps them with someone else for something they'll wear more often. 18,000 tonnes of waste is thrown away each year. Recycling unsellable clothes would be a great way to bring this number down.
So we'd also like the recycle centre to partner with us to take any potentially leftover clothes from the swaps events so that the schools don't have to deal with those, as that could be discouraging for them. What we need is people willing to participate in second-hand shopping and make it cool again. Thank you.
We've already got one school that will support us
in our journey to give us the space to hold the swap events.
I mean, is recycling clothes an actual thing?
Yeah, I did have a look at that, and there are actually quite a few programs in Auckland that do recycled clothing, and they have quite good results I've seen.
Costs a lot more to actually recycle and to process them and find out like what's still good clothing that they can recycle.
A little idea. When you have a school event like a dance or a sports day when you're not wearing uniform, to make it a rule for that event that you have to wear clothes from an op shop, not new. Another idea that to make a rule for yourself that you only buy 3 new things each year and everything else has to be from an op shop.
When we had a school dance at Nelson Intermediate, we had this op shop challenge where you would buy something from an op shop and wear it to the school dance. Sorry, I got a dress from an op shop and I like altered it and made like really cool stuff, and then I wore it to the dance and it was really fun.
Even teaching people how to like darn stuff by hand repairs a lot of holes in old clothes.
So this is our problem, is that we have low amounts of marine species in the Tasman Bay because they have no consistent habitats to produce and thrive in. Now, reasons for them to have no consistent habitats are things like high amounts of sedimentation, high temperatures in the water, and human intervention. So this is why we have low amounts of marine species in the Tasman Bay, which is a huge problem.
So our focus for this project is going to be on establishing that stable and consistent habitat, as previously mentioned. And when implementing this solution, we're going to be focusing on the sustainability, so it doesn't backfire on us. We're also going to be focusing on the efficiency with regard to cost, so we can secure the funding necessary, resources, so that achieving this is actually feasible, time, so that even if we do run over time, we've still completed some large milestones by the end of this course. And finally, we're going to be focusing on the impact that we're going to make, because it's the whole point, and we need to make as large a difference as we possibly can.
Living seawalls, like in Sydney Harbour, where they put 3D printed concrete artificial reef structures on wharfs. Statues provide a tourist attraction, so you can kind of be cost efficient and get some money to pay for materials. And the California artificial reef was where they planted kelp forests, which increase water quality and marine biodiversity.
Things we need to think about when making artificial reefs is to not sink polluted materials that will negatively impact the marine ecosystems, such as unnatural oils, treated wood, and peeling paint. Some artificial reef designs mimic real coral reef structures, attracting more marine life. The California artificial reef is the most successful artificial reef ever created, so we can learn lots of aspects of what went well in that artificial reef.
The outcome we hope to achieve is build back the marine ecosystem in Nelson Tasman Bay, encourage the marine life to come back into the bay. We want to do this by implementing a safe habitat where our marine life can thrive and be safe in.
Some resources or help we might need are donated resources from local organisations like Moana Oyster Hatcheries, MacLab or Cawthron, or even artists that are interested in creating structures to support marine life, like the living seawall. And most importantly, public support to get people into the Nelson Tasman area and interested in preserving it.
How much research have you done into what the marine life actually is like in the Tasman Bay? Kind of wondering if our sea life here is a slightly different ecosystem that's not necessarily, seawalls are not a natural thing. So I'm curious if you have looked at more sandy shores or dunes or sandy, shallow bay ecosystems.
We had a person come in from Cawthron, and he gave us a couple of these ideas about the seawalls, about the sunken shipwreck. In terms of seawalls being unnatural, he did mention how artificial reefs and these different habitats that are created by people are never going to be efficient as the naturally generating ones. The goal is still to try and replicate as accurately as possible a natural habitat using different complexities in the design, which is what the seawall aims to do.
Right? If you can reduce sedimentation, then you're going to have a much richer marine life. Water temperatures are increasing, means you're going to get a different mix of fish species and other marine species. So you're not going to get back what was there originally. It's going to change over time. And you shouldn't expect to recreate what there was before. I think it's going to be different. It'd be interesting to know how different.
Is anyone already working on this in the Nelson Tasman region?
Spoken to the Cawthron people, they were sort of once again this idea of the shipwreck one. The idea of the shipwreck is it's naturally just got a bunch of complexities. It should be pretty easy to implement since you can just grab a random ship, strip it of harmful resources and just dump it in the ocean once you get a permit.
Cawthron they also have a seagrass farm, which I think is really beneficial to the water health in our moana currently and increases a lot of biodiversity, which I think is really effective right now and something to learn from.
Did you know that New Zealand has one of the highest per capita rates of e-waste production in the world? And yet, despite that, we have one of the lowest, only 2%, rates of e-waste recycling. E-waste is dangerous. It is dangerous to the workers who deal with it. It is harmful to the environment. And it is also a colossal waste of materials which could have been recovered and reused, but instead are lost forever when they are thrown away. One of the major reasons why people don't recycle e-waste is the cost. To my knowledge, nowhere in New Zealand is free to recycle e-waste. This cost comes mainly from the transport of e-waste to the right facilities in Nelson. That's usually to Auckland or Christchurch. Some countries like Estonia, Norway, and Sweden are making great progress in this issue with strong government legislation. But to push for something similar here, we would need strong public support. That's why now we have chosen to focus on raising awareness in the general public to make sure that you know just how important this issue is and why it matters to all of us.
One of the main reasons us New Zealanders produce heaps of e-waste is that we lack laws and legislation. Many countries have legislation in place with goals to reduce e-waste, but did you know that New Zealand is the only country in the OECD without national laws on e-waste? This massively puts us at a disadvantage towards stopping e-waste. The easier it is to recycle electronics, the more people participate, and the proper recycling is expensive, so many companies do choose to put profits before sustainability, mainly because people just don't know how much e-waste affects us. E-waste is an unrecognised threat to the environment. In fact, over 50 million tonnes of e-waste is produced every year. That's nearly the equivalent of 17 billion laptops. And that's over twice the amount of people than there are on Earth. So it's extremely important to raise awareness of this issue.
If you could take your old device to a school or work or any big organization to be fixed or sold.
We really want to raise awareness of the problem that is affecting our environment. We would also love it if people could hold on to good, still working devices despite how old they are. We live in a world where every year there is a new and improved device on the market. But if you can keep your current device running for even a few years extra, it can make such a huge impact. We really need your help to make this happen. We need to promote public awareness, and it starts with all of you sitting here today.
I'm really interested in the idea of trying to reduce rather than getting to the end of the line, having to recycle. Did you think about ideas of changing behaviours around getting new products and particularly targeting teenagers?
Like I said before, there's lots of marketing for the newer models, and so we really want to push that it can be fixed and it doesn't have to
be thrown straight to landfill just to get the new model, because it can be working fine and it can still probably go on for quite a while before it needs to go into landfill.
Have you heard about there's a national organisation across New Zealand which is in a bunch of different schools called Recycle a Device, or RAD. Fixed devices, you can walk in, you can dump a device and they can just help fix it, or they can loot it for parts.
Well, when we were researching previous solutions, obviously that name has come up quite a few times. Anything that does raise awareness or helps people help fix devices that could be repaired, yeah, that would be great. Currently, we've been to the Environment Centre, specifically the electronic part of the Environment Centre.
Needing Chromebooks for some of our former refugee students. And I just wondered if you guys had thought about the who, in terms of often as we are more motivated to do something with our old devices if we know who it's going to, or if we can see a cause that will catalyse us to go into our cupboard and find these old devices and give them away.
Yeah, we definitely have looked into things like people who obviously need devices or don't have enough money to get devices, because obviously lots of people don't have access to that. So we've definitely looked into helping those sort of people.
There may be parts that can be reused to repair computers that can then be that are maybe not working quite properly, that then can be resold at cheaper prices for people who might need it for education or work.
That lots of food is being wasted and being sent to landfill. This creates an estimated 6.5% of all global emissions. This problem is happening at all levels of the supply chain, from when farmers plan for what to plant, to when supermarkets decide that food has gone off, all the way to when us consumers throw out our leftovers.
As a group, our focus is to reduce food waste on farms and in supermarkets, in particular the food that doesn't meet cosmetic standards. We want to try to encourage reusing as much of that food as possible, for example, pricing it cheaper for preserving or cooking rather than fresh eating, or build composting systems on farms that can be reused and sustain another year's worth of growth and profit for the farm. We've had a lot of trouble reaching out to supermarkets for support on our idea. All of them were very reluctant to share information on what they're actively doing to tackle the issue of food waste and how much food is actually being wasted. All of them were just very keen to push the issue into the background and ignore it as much as possible.
Across the country, there are many community organisations which help take food and rescue it. In Nelson, Tasman, we have Kai Rescue. So they go to supermarkets and they also go to some farms. So with supermarkets, any food that is going off and can't be sold anymore, they will snatch it up and distribute it to different community organisations to be given to people who may be in food insecurity or have a need for food. Since they began in 2017, they have rescued a grand total of slightly over 1 million kilograms of food from the region, which is estimated to have saved around 3 million kilograms of carbon emissions. One thing for food that is going off and can't be distributed to people anymore is to be fed to animals on farms, which is a really great way of sending it to a useful place instead of sending it to landfill.
Some of the most promising ideas for further exploration are distributing food from people who have too much to people who don't have enough.
Our goal is to save at least 500 kilograms of fresh produce from farms and households from going into landfill every week and create a system that is able to be used for generations to come.
We want help from local businesses to help us understand what is being wasted and what areas could have more improvement so we can know where to focus more on improving. Thank you.
I would encourage you to try and keep lifting the lid on supermarkets. I've had reasonably positive experience in that area, and it seems to me that that's one of the missing links in your chain, is there's a lot of waste goes out of there, and it would be really good if you could be part of finding a path for it to get to a better destination.
I wonder if you could work with those supermarkets to take that waste and preserve it somehow, for example, through jams or chutneys or other food solutions and then sell it back to the supermarkets.
Have you looked into the waste that occurs just in the packing industry? Every kiwi fruit that has a little bird poo on it just gets thrown away. They're not washed.
We haven't looked into that truckload, but we are well aware that it is quite a big issue of a lot of stuff doesn't even make it off of the farms because it isn't worthwhile them sending them to the supermarket because then they're going to have to pay for it to either be disposed of or shipped back to them because it doesn't meet their standards.
But whatever will go on landfill, that's what we really need to focus on, I believe, and what can be done to avoid for all of that to go into landfill. Okay, what can be done on a practical way to avoid anything from that supermarket that day to go into landfill. Even 1 day a week would be a great success. That's how I see it, one step at a time.
Buy a drink at the supermarket. You drink it and then throw the container away. What does away actually mean? Have you ever thought about what happens to that bottle? What if you could refill it?
We have been given the task of trying to implement refillable juice systems into supermarkets. So what's stopping us? Supermarkets produce huge amounts of single-use plastic bottles. Our little New Zealand alone produces over 2 billion plastic bottles each year, with only over a third of them ending up in our landfills. A step in the right direction would be for these systems to be put into supermarkets. Unfortunately, there are many restrictions that prevent us from doing this, such as the very strict safety regulations, the cost of setup, and consumer demand, or lack thereof. While there are many people who are searching for eco-friendly alternatives, there are still a majority of people who are unaware of the impact plastic bottles have on our environment.
Our focus is to explore various methods to reduce single-use plastic bottles by implementing refillable juice systems in supermarkets, addressing health and safety issues, and increasing consumer demand. The most important of these problems is consumer demand, as supermarkets are often reluctant to address and overcome health and safety laws and other issues impeding these systems without a strong incentive to change or adapt to them. Because of this, we need to spread the word and grow the incentive for refillable juice systems to become a reality.
One of the biggest examples is in France, the government passed a law that made large shops and supermarkets devote 20% of their floor space to refillable systems by 2030. Some of the things New Zealand has, for example, the local Rutherford Hotel juice system, where they have an airtight keg which Cheers is provided, and a fridge to cool the juice that makes last a lot longer. And the Lewis Road Creamery in Auckland, where they teamed up with the famous Whittaker's chocolate to make a much desired drink to put in the supermarket, with a popular refillable system that was extremely accessible. Some providers are getting past the very restrictive food safety regulations, like using stainless steel reusable bottles and the ever famous Oakland's milk, which you can refill glass bottles or get it delivered to you. All of this isn't without challenge. The costs of bottles, packaging and transport, the ever-present food safety regulations, and finally, generating consumer demand.
Some ideas we have so far have been a standalone system. Instead of waiting for the government to change their regulations, what if we had a mobile system that travelled around and delivered juice, or was available for refills? A deli system. We could install a system inside a supermarket, but beside the deli. This would be super accessible and easy to find for everyone, and supervision wouldn't be a problem because staff are always at the deli. To actually do these solutions, we need to get demand for them. Currently, there is nothing incentivizing supermarkets to put in a reusable system, so we need to create some groundswell. If we identify a good model, we could get consumer interest and create some. This would encourage supermarkets to install reusable systems and also educate the public.
Our best case scenario is to have Cheers' refillable system into our supermarkets, to find a way around the very strict safety policies. Maybe by increasing consumer demand to reduce waste from plastic bottles, which would then incentivize supermarkets to consider implementing a refillable juice system model. But we understand that this is quite ambitious, so we also want to use this project as an opportunity to raise people's awareness
of how much damage is caused by our single-use mindsets. We could collaborate with other companies such as Oakland's and Lewis Road Creameries who are refilling and reusing their bottles and share the goal of reducing plastic waste. However, to do this, we need more consumer demand. We need to spread the word. We can help to advertise refillable juice systems in supermarkets by promoting a model that we can refine and perfect once we can learn of the specific health and safety regulations that are preventing supermarkets from making an immediate change. If we, the consumers, increase demand for less plastic consumption, we incentivise supermarkets to provide our drinks in ways that aren't harmful to the planet, and by extension, us.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. I hope this encourages you to at least think twice before buying single-use plastic bottles.
So if we're at the supermarket and Cheer Sisters is selling their juice next to Oakland's on tap so that you can fill it from a container, who else do you want to be seen there, and how can we get them on board?
Anyone else in particular? Any type of, food or drink you think would be good to go with a refillable system?
Probably like soft drinks, because as you've probably noticed, there's like Coca-Cola, for example. They've got a million brands of like drink out there, and they're basically all in plastic. So it would be really useful if we could encourage them to participate in reusable systems in supermarkets.
The reason why we've done the reusable ones is because the supermarkets have really strict safety things, so they need to make sure that there's no contamination, even though it is your own container. And so they've kind of pretty much said there's you're not allowed to bring anything in, and that's why it's become so difficult, is because to have our own containers, they need to be cleaned and all that. And so that's what we're working on at the moment.
Have you talked to any companies about whether they would provide discounted products that would be cheaper if you refill it that way? Because that would be a way to get people on board.
We were thinking of maybe how it used to be done, where you get some of your money back when you return the bottle. So maybe at the cash register or something, the lady would give you back maybe some money if you give back the bottle. We haven't talked to anyone in particular yet, but that'll be next.
I just want to acknowledge the clarity in which you all presented and in your understanding of the issues and how we can start to address them. All of the issues you chose are really, really big and can so easily be incredibly overwhelming. The fact that you embarked, chose them, and have been persevering through to come up with genuine solutions really filled my heart with joy. There are things we can be doing now. When we're evaluating the costs of alternatives, often we start at zero and work our way up. But without doing the maths on, for something like sedimentation, how much money are we currently spending downstream already dealing with all of those impacts versus how much it would cost to regulate and create a system where those impacts didn't exist at all? And the same is true across all of the issues. Clothing team, I can proudly declare that this 50% of my outfit is secondhand, so that if they make it too cool, my shopping experience will be a lot harder. For the marine team, can I recommend you check out what they've done in Wellington as part of their Cycleway program round to Lower Hutt, where they've built what our former Transport Minister called, I think, fish temples, but have been a really effective way of supporting the ecosystems there. The e-waste team, again, how do we reduce at source? And so all of your ideas around that were really exciting. Cheer Children, in Nelson you can get refillable wine, but looking at how they've managed to navigate the regulations to allow that to happen, there's always this conflict where we think of the status quo as common sense. And I think the way you've broken down these issues has showed how untrue that is. Remember that this is something that takes all of us. All of your energies and passions is so worth the time you're putting into it. So many ideas fail to get off the ground, and even if they do, I can say, just from this, walking away, you've given me a new spring in my step to get back into the council building and keep fighting to address some of the systemic issues here, but I really can't wait to see your practical solutions on the ground coming to life.